Welcome to the third session of analyzing, if you like, anatomizing the speech by Rahul Gandhi as the leader of the opposition in the 18th Lok Sabha of the Indian Parliament. In this unit, or in this video, we begin to look at the substance, the content of the speech. But before I do that, a word of general observation is in place. Why do we pay attention to a speech and seem to accord to it a disproportionate extent of attention and therefore of importance? It's not that we want to hail Sri Rahul Gandhi as the greatest leader of this century. We are not sycophants, we are not courtiers. We are responsible, mature members of a democratic state, a democratic society. And therefore, we have a duty to understand events concerning us and phenomena that surface from time to time from a dispassionate, truthful, objective point of view. I've always believed, and history bears me out, that thinking is the secret of freedom. A people who refuse to think and who merely lives by imbibing the opinions manufactured and aired from time to time by certain centers of vested interest falls short of the eligibility requirements for enjoying freedom. You can't be a mental slave and at the same time the carriers of freedom in other respects. If you are a slave in the mind, you will also be a slave in all other respects. Freedom is of the very essence of democracy, as the preamble to the Indian Constitution makes amply clear. The four fundamental values stated in the preamble are, as all of us know, justice, liberty, equality, fraternity. Renounce or compromise any of those cardinal fundamental values, the Indian democracy will collapse. That's the seriousness with which I undertake my political reflections, which are not political in character but constitutional and spiritual in nature. And therefore, it will necessarily happen that I will be attacked, criticized and despised by both camps. As Gandhi once said, the convincing proof that I am on the right track is that I am attacked by both camps, the two opposite camps, which proves, if proof is required, that I don't belong as a slave or an unthinking camp follower to either of the two groups. India is a highly polarized society at this present time. Polarization means that a society is split into two groups and no middle ground is obtained. You have to belong to this camp or that camp. Either you belong to the NDA or you belong to the UPA. There is no space for a third block of opinion. Whether you like it or not, I belong to the third block of opinion, which is neither UPA nor NDA. I belong to a new political bloc called humanity. I believe that politics must exist for human beings and not human beings for politics. So I'm a humanist in politics, just as I'm a humanist in religion. And I believe that God's greatest agenda is justice for every human being, particularly justice for the weak and the downtrodden. So that's the reason why we tried to look at this very significant phase of the 18th Lok Sabha of our post-independence history. Now, having stated that, having made that clear, I hope it's clear, and having welcomed adverse criticism from both camps with equanimity, with equal fortitude, without feeling rejected, dejected or elated, let's now proceed to analyzing the substance of Rahul Gandhi's very remarkable speech. I say it again and again, is a remarkable speech. It is remarkable in so many ways. To give you a taste of what I mean when I say remarkable speech, let me begin with something technical which I actually did not intend to. I wanted from now onwards to concentrate only on the substance of his speech. Now, if you look at his strategies of communication, you will see certain very interesting things. First of all, Rahul Gandhi supplemented his verbal presentation with visual aids. He came equipped with a set of photographs, and those photographs were very carefully chosen, and he brought them knowing precisely well that showing them in the parliament would provoke the opposite camp. But he had a point in bringing them and showing them, and he made that point, I think, reasonably well. So he used visual aids to complement his verbal abilities, which are not poor, which are actually considerable. The second thing that you would notice is that he also used tonal variations brilliantly for rhetorical effect. There are certain speakers who would maintain the same wavelength of presentation. Rahul knows how to vary the tonal qualities of his presentation in tune with the substance he is handling at any given point in time. The third thing that he used brilliantly is the use of anecdotes. See, when you make a long speech, he spoke for more than an hour and a half. When you make a long speech, people are likely to get bored, though the context is such that nobody can really get bored in an atmosphere as surcharged as that was. The likelihood of someone falling asleep when the LOP is speaking is rather remote. Even so, it is a great help to vary thematic and verbal presentation with the very deliberate and carefully planned use of anecdotes, events. Now, what these events are, I will not detail because that will make time a big problem. Time will get out of hand. The fourth thing that he used brilliantly, and I owe this insight, this most beautiful and brilliant insight, to a member of our YouTube Sangamam, YouTube Fellowship. Since I am not in the habit of mentioning anybody by name, I am not going to deviate from that practice unless and until the person who makes the opinion also writes to me or states there itself that he or she does not have any objection to his or her name being used or revealed. I'll stick to the practice of not taking anybody's name. So please let me know if you're open to being personally cited when I use the insights that you provide. I personally feel that your name must be cited and I should be able to acknowledge you as a source of good, brilliant insights. Now, in this particular case, a very discerning member of our YouTube fellowship points out that Rahul Gandhi switched languages brilliantly. For example, when he was talking about Agniveer, he spoke in Hindi because he had to connect to the rural, predominantly rural youth of India who would feel more at home in the medium of Hindi. But when it came to issues like the NEET, he spoke in English because the NEET is a more emotive issue in the south, and the segment of the youth that's affected by the NEET is quite happy with English. Now, I hadn't really noticed it. I have to say that this observation is brilliant. And so what I'm saying is that Rahul Gandhi used a variety of techniques. These are not his inventions. These techniques have been well known for as long as the art of oratory existed in human civilization, but he used them to brilliant effect. I must also add here that Rahul Gandhi has a touch of humor. I don't know to what extent he is aware of it. I have no reason to believe that he is unaware of it. Even if he is aware of it, he uses his sense of humor in a very subtle and indirect manner, and the number of times he provoked laughter in the course of his presentation is enough corroboration or proof that he has a sense of humor. And the subtlety of humor, or subtlety in using humor, lies in being humorous without pretending to be humorous. And that's a very dignified way of using humor in the course of a public speech. There are other aspects to it, but this much is enough to indicate that he is a good orator and that he can match. And of course, the Modi camp will be upset when I say this. I am today convinced that Rahul can match Sri Narendra Damodar Das Modi in the art of oratory, word for word, gesture for gesture, blow for blow, no question about it. And what makes all of these techniques click is his fearlessness. Suppose you know all the various tricks in the trade of public speaking, but you are a coward, then your knowing is as good as not knowing, because either you will not use them, or even if you use them, you will use them in a botched up manner and it will have no effect. But in the way Rahul Gandhi deployed this set of speech skills has been enhanced and empowered by his fearlessness. So on the whole, it was a creditable piece of oratory. Now let's begin to analyze the thematic substance. As I pointed out earlier, Rahul Gandhi began his speech right at the outset by showing a picture. It was a picture of Lord Shiva. And I think it's one of the most calculated rhetorical master strokes that he ever adopted. And let me explain to you why. Now, Lord Shiv is the Ishta Devada, or the main deity for a large number of Hindus. They are called Shaivites, the worshippers of Shiva. And introducing the image of Shiv or Shiva, I'll stick to the pronunciation Shiva. In English, it would be in a purist pronunciation sense, it should be Shiv, but it's much better to use our native pronunciation Shiva. He identified the three symbols. He began by identifying the snake, which is very close to the throat of Shiva, and interpreted the positioning of the serpent or the snake as a symbol of fearlessness. Shiva symbolizes fearlessness. And from that, he argues that fearlessness is of the essence of Hinduism. Please note, fearlessness is of the essence of Hinduism. What's the implication? The implication is not lost on anyone. If you are a Hindu, you cannot afford to be a coward. You have to be fearless. He would, of course, go on to make an elaborate use of the idea of fearlessness, but I'll come to that in a short while after dealing with the three symbols that he introduced. The second symbol that he referred to was the Trishul. Now, we know the political use of the Trishul, and I don't have to say anything more about it. It was Sri Praveen Togadia who used or abused the Trishul in a characteristic fashion, and contradicting all of that without making any reference to how the Trishul has been misused or abused in specific context. Rahul Gandhi merely argues that Trishul, to the extent that it is poised to the left of the Lord Shiva, is a symbol not of violence but of non-violence. Because if it were meant to be a symbol of violence, it would have been to the right of Lord Shiva. But here it is always to the left, which means it is not meant to be used as a weapon of violence, but it's a weapon of ahimsa, that is the deliberate, principled renunciation of faith in violence, or faith in the use of violence. Of course, it's a matter of interpretation. Religious symbols can be interpreted in a variety of ways. All of us are aware of this. So it is possible to interpret this Trishul as symbolizing the past, the present and the future. Trishul, the past, present and future. But that's not the interpretation that Sri Rahul Gandhi used. He used it as a symbol of ahimsa, and nobody can say that that interpretation is altogether far-fetched, and that the symbol of Trishul does not imply the theme of ahimsa. In fact, universally, as regards all spiritual traditions, violence is incompatible with the core of every spiritual tradition worth the name. I don't want to go into details. A broad statement is good enough. Violence is incompatible with spirituality. And therefore, Rahul is on very solid grounds when he says that we must read the symbol of the Trishul as associated with the person of Lord Shiva as a symbol of ahimsa, or the principal renunciation of violence as a problem-solving method. That's the second symbol. The third symbol that he pointed out was the symbol of, what was it? Abhaya, the mudra, the symbol of Abhaya. Abhaya means breaking the stranglehold of violence and offering protection and peace. So protection and peace. You are not without any refuge. You are not helpless. You don't have to live in fear. You have protection. You are entitled to peace. You belong. It's a very reassuring idea. And Rahul then connects it to the symbol of the Congress party, which is also the Abhaya Mudra. Now, whether the Abhaya Mudra means this or something else is again open to interpretation. Since it's not a class on symbolism, I will not go into any of these things, but I'll confine myself entirely to the meanings that Rahul Gandhi ascribed to these symbols by way of interpreting them. Abhaya. Now, the most brilliant thing he did is this, and that's the only thing I want to state for the rest of the video, and that is Rahul Gandhi connects all three symbols associated with the person of Lord Shiva: snake as a symbol of fearlessness, Trishul as a symbol of non-violence, and Abhaya as a mudra or a gesture of protection and peace. All of them belong together in creating a way of life, or an ambience, an environment of life free from fear. And then he went on to connect this mandate to be delivered from living in subjection to fear, or living in a state of fearfulness, to the spiritual core of all spiritual traditions that India knows. He invoked Lord Buddha and said that Buddha's exhortation was Daro mat, Daravo mat, do not fear, do not intimidate anyone. The idea of ahimsa, the idea of compassion, which is akin to the law of life. Then he invoked Lord Mahavir, the principal deity for the Jains, and again the same thing: do not fear, do not intimidate anyone, do not use the idea or the strategy of violence. He referred to Islam. The very word Islam means peace, and again he said the central message in Islam is do not fear, do not use violence, do not intimidate anyone. He referred to Christianity and again said Jesus renounced the path of violence, and he said if somebody slaps you on one cheek, show the other. Of course, he did not say that Jesus said you must love even your enemies. If that single principle taught by Jesus, I think, is the only one in human history to have stated this, it's a fact and not a concoction in order to privilege one religion over the other. I don't believe in the inferiority and superiority of religions. Rather, I believe that all religions are alike. But the founders of religion, the spiritual luminaries that founded paved the way towards the founding of various religions, they vary in their teachings, but there is a substantial degree of agreement as regards the spiritual core of these religions. Jesus said you must love your enemies. Now, if that one principle can be practiced in Indian democracy, in conducting the affairs of the parliament, we will do a lot better. If the two camps in the Indian parliament, the NDA and the UPA, if they can love one another for the sake of the people of India, for the sake of the greatness and dignity of India as a nation, the outcome would be dramatically better than what it otherwise would be. A lot of our national energies are being wasted through this very conflictual relationship between the two major political blocs, and that's eminently avoidable. So a paradigm shift is needed from the present conflictual relationship between the political camps to a more cooperative model, which is possible only if there is a framework of love. And therefore, Jesus' teaching, which seems only religious or spiritual, has profound political relevance when he says, love your enemies and pray for those who revile you and persecute you, right? So now he proceeds to the next important stage of his argument. He has established that Lord Shiv is associated with three symbols, and all three of them together constitute an invitation to live fearlessly and to embrace ahimsa as a way of life. And then from there he goes on to connect the same to the spiritual core of all other spiritual traditions or religious traditions. And then he proceeds to the idea of unity in diversity. And that's beautiful. Now, what is he doing here? He is contrasting his vision for the unity of India, the vision for the unity of India, which was at the core of the freedom struggle, core of the Gandhian vision for India, the core for a long time of the political vision of the International Congress, INC, that is unity in diversity, as stated so ably and brilliantly, convincingly by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, to a completely different idea of unity, which is anything but unity. It is uniformity. Now, the difference between unity and uniformity is that for unity to exist, there must be diversity. You cannot have unity in the absence of diversity and variety, whereas uniformity is intolerant to diversity or plurality. So, in the vision of the Sangh Parivar, there is no room for unity because it is singularly focused on uniformity. That's why it swears by the goal of homogenization. One nation, one culture, one religion, maybe one language, one tax, maybe one leader, like in the case of Putin's Russia or Xi's China, so on and so forth. Now that, according to Rahul Gandhi, and I think is absolutely on strong grounds here, that spells the doom of Indian democracy. This distortion of unity or this degradation of unity into uniformity, which is a vision that cannot but generate a culture of intolerance and unending conflicts, because this idea of uniformity is fundamentally contrary to the law of life, the law of nature, the law of history. It simply cannot exist. If you try to ram it down, if you try to establish it by force, you will only sink a society, pull it deeper and deeper into conflict, internecine wars, civil strife, which is totally wasteful of all our energies. And in the process, the avowed or stated intention to develop the country and to make it an economic giant among the Committee of Nations will be lost sight of. The people of India and their welfare will be lost sight of. And everything will be given up in favor of fighting this battle of attrition between the two camps. They will always be there, just as a day comprises both day and night. So, in a democratic context, you cannot have a political framework where only one party alone rules. There will always be an opposition of some kind or the other. And when the opposition party is weakened, the people themselves fill that vacuum and they serve as the opposition. And the symptoms of that we have already seen in the case, shall we say, of the peasants' resistance, the farmers' protest, so on and so forth. And also in the 2024 elections, I think the outcome must be attributed not to the effectiveness of a political party or a group of political parties, but to the fact that the people themselves realized and put in place or have put in place a corrective mechanism, of which members of the India Alliance are the beneficiaries, and the ultimate beneficiary is democracy in India. So, Rahul Gandhi has counterpointed a Unitarian and therefore necessarily intolerant idea and practice of politics, the intolerance of which is further aggravated by the communalization of politics, the majoritarian communal self-aggression, which is at the center of this entire project. Rahul counterpoints or contrasts that with the vision of India, which is native to the Indian soul, namely unity in diversity. India is inherently diverse. You cannot root out diversity from India without destroying India. Why? What's the greatest evidence? The greatest of evidence is Hinduism itself. There is no other religion in the world which celebrates, which has celebrated, which has generated and celebrated diversity, plurality, even contrariness to the extent that the Sanatana Dharma has. I believe that is its greatest strength. I believe that is its greatest richness. In comparison, monolithic religions are actually poorer philosophically, poorer visually, poorer in terms of the emotional content, poorer in terms of encapsulating the tremendous ramifications and the multifarious phases of human existence upon planet Earth, so on and so forth. So, for the BJP, led by or driven by Shri Amit Shah and Narendra Damodar Modi, to create a monolithic political bloc in the interest of concentrating power in their hands by virtually destroying the greatest beauty, the greatest richness of the Sanatana Dharma and the Hindu culture that's born out of it, will, as Rahul Gandhi argues, will be an act of aggression that is avoidable, but that will be practiced on Hinduism as a way of life. And from there, and I close on this, from there he then goes on to launch the frontal attack on BJP, and particularly Sri Narendra Damodar Das Modi and Amit Shah. He says that a Hindu is by definition tolerant, non-violent, truthful. But you people have renounced all these three attributes of Hinduism and embraced their opposite anti-values. In place of truth, you bank entirely on falsehood. In place of ahimsa, you use hinsa or violence. And where a culture of tolerance towards diversities and the multifarious facets of life You uphold uniformity, homogeneity, which cannot but breed intolerance towards the infinite panorama of variety, diversity, multiplicity of plenitude, which characterizes India and which constitutes the richness of the Indian culture and the Indian experience. So, this is by and large one aspect. I have not been comprehensive in analyzing the thematic substance of Rahul's presentation. But here you can see how very carefully and cleverly he packaged his material. And it's very interesting that in his presentation, he depended or he banked very heavily on the interpretation of symbolism. Now, that fascinates me because I'm a teacher of literature and therefore by training, I think in terms of symbols and images. And the ability to think in terms of images, I'm given to understand, and I don't say this because I'm of that category. It is universally agreed that the ability to think in terms of images, think through images, denotes a very high order of development of the person concerned. If you're not developed in your imaginative faculty, even your intellectual faculties, you will remain a literalist, that is, one who goes only by the letter of the text and is not able to understand the spirit of something. So you can talk about patriotism but not understand the spirit of patriotism. You can talk about the greatness of Hinduism but not understand the spirit of it. So in the process of promoting the literal hegemony of Hinduism through a political control exercised over India, you could actually corrupt and destroy the very symbolic soul of Hinduism. That is the note of warning that Sri Rahul Gandhi has struck in one of the most significant contexts in our continued evolution as a constitutional democracy in a young nation. After all, India is not an old, we are an ancient civilization, but we are a young nation. We are just about 75 years old. 75 years in the life of a nation is almost the same as 75 days in the life of a human being. So we are a very young nation. And therefore, for him to have struck this significant note of warning in the context of an unfolding constitutional democracy, I think is a very, very responsible, mature, and timely service rendered to the country. Of course, it will fall flat or it will fall on deaf ears as far as the opposition camp is concerned. Because unfortunately, when you are divided into two warring factions, when the members of the other camp listen to you, then only look for opportunities to pick holes in your argument. And therefore, the beauties and the substance of what you present to them will be completely lost on them. It's not an achievement, it is a formula that will only result in one's own impoverishment. And as an academic, as a lifelong servant in the cause of education in this country, I have to tell you that people of this disposition ensure their own impoverishment and their own intellectual crippling. And this is true not just of the NDA, it's equally true as regards the UPA as well. When members of the UPA listen to the other camp, they do exactly as members of the NDA listening to speakers from the UPA. I consider this to be infantile. So when people say that we are a mature democracy, pardon me, I'm not convinced. We have to become a mature democracy. We have all the circumstances favorable. We have everything it takes to become a mature democracy, which can be a shining example to the rest of the world. But we are not yet there, and we cannot progress any further unless we outgrow and leave behind the present infantile attitudes, practices, and positionings which today mar the festival of Indian democracy. I'm an optimist. I love my country, and I believe that the people of India deserve better. That's the reason why I think objectively on this issue and argue to the best of my ability that both parties need to now examine themselves and see how and to what extent they need to change their outlook and their practices and become a little more mature in carrying out the responsibilities cast upon them by the world's largest democratic population in the world. It's not a small responsibility, it's a great onus or responsibility upon them. My prayer is, may both camps prove themselves worthy of the trust reposed in them by the people of India. We, the people of India. Jai Hind.